Well, what a joy to have baptised Bryony this morning. She's having a great time over there. It's wonderful. Such a joy. I also found out that Carl was a landscaper, and so I'm already trying to rope him in to help us with the rectory garden. He's laughing. He doesn't know what's going to hit him. It's just, we've got all sorts of plans. But no, seriously, it's amazing to have you all with us this morning. Those who are here for Bryony's baptism as well. It's great to have you with us. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt unwelcome? It's a broad question, isn't it? I'm sure at one point or another, all of us have been in a situation where we felt that. It's horrible, isn't it, when you feel unwelcome? If you're anything like me, you become really self-conscious. You become very anxious. You don't know what to say. You become a bit nervous. You feel like you're the odd one out, don't you, in the room? Feeling unwelcome is horrible. No one wants that. For me, one of these places is the gym. Why are you laughing? No, I'm joking. I told someone the other day that for Lent, I had given up going to the gym, which they seemed really impressed by until they realised that I never go to the gym. But the gym for me, and by the way, some of you will have a different experience at the gym. God bless you. May you prosper in your gym memberships. Wonderful. But I go to the gym and I feel like I shouldn't be there. I watch people give me looks as I struggle to figure out what all the different machines do. I'm like one of those people you watch on YouTube who's like trying to lift weights with my tummy or something, I don't know. I watch people give me interesting looks as if like wearing a tie-dye t-shirt with Umbro shorts and a yellow headband somehow isn't cool. And a couple of times when I've asked a member of staff at the said gym a question, they give me an irritated reply as if just by stepping into this setting, I should already know how everything works. You can imagine my surprise when a few years ago, a vicar at a church that I was working at signed me up, this is no joke, signed me up to a gym instructor course for 2 weeks in order to run a spinning class at our church as an outreach project. No, we're not starting it up at St Wilfrid's. Absolutely not. And I'll tell you the rest of that story another time, but it's too painful. It's too painful right now. You know, I mainly told you that to have a bit of a quick laugh, to be honest with you. But on a more serious note, it's even possible to feel unwelcome in the church. Maybe you're in here, you've experienced that for yourself. I remember hearing a story a few years ago of a friend who went to a church service, quite a grand church service, in support of a friend. And as part of this service, they celebrated communion. And when the guy went up to receive communion, the server didn't offer him any bread. And when he asked the server about this, she simply said to him that she saw his long hair and tattoos and assumed that he wasn't a Christian. He was. We're aware of devastating moments of unwelcome in our history as the church. The Windrush generation, particularly from the Church of England, is a stark example of this. In the last couple of years, we've become aware again, haven't we, through the death of George Floyd, of our need as a church, nationally and internationally, to live into the mandate to welcome everyone, no matter their background or the colour of their skin. As a church, there are times where we have failed spectacularly to extend the welcome that God gives to each of us. However, and there is a however, the church, at its best, is a miracle. It's nothing short of supernatural. It's an outpost of the kingdom in our cities and villages and towns. It gives itself to the service of others. It loves with the love of Christ. It works tirelessly for the communities in which it exists. It seeks justice. It feeds the hungry. It puts the lonely in families. It welcomes the lost. And it works tirelessly to transform the communities where it's based. You know, even though I didn't grow up in a Christian family, I didn't grow up around the church, I've realised more and more over the years that the church has always been there for me, even before I was a part of it. When I was a 9-year-old child, grieving the loss of my mum, the church was there for me. When my dad was fighting for his own life in hospital, the church was there for me. When I had questions and doubts, the church was there for me. When I was paralysed by anxiety and struggled to get out of bed in the morning, the church was there for me. When I didn't have enough money to get through the next week, the church was there for me. And that's because, contrary to popular belief perhaps, the church wasn't a building. It wasn't even a set of ideas or doctrines. The church was a people. Ordinary, broken people who had met with Jesus. That's what the church is. Ordinary people who have met with Jesus and seek to show his love to others. It was my childhood friend Francois and his parents Lynette and Rake. It was Peter and Enid, an elderly couple from my small village who used to drive me to services. It was Johnny, a young man in London who gave me money when I had nothing to live on. It was Callie and Ralph, a couple who prayed for my family when our world was falling apart. It was James and Lindsay who gave me a sofa to sleep on when I needed it. And it was Mark who encouraged me when I was alone and scared and tired. The church was these people to me. This was the church. It was these people and many more. And even in the time that Kate and I have been a part of St. Wilfrid's, we've heard stories, similar stories in this community over the years. Stories that have already brought me to tears. Nowhere else in the world, when the church is at its best, nowhere else in the world have I experienced the love that I've experienced in the church. It's full of broken, ordinary, messy people, but it is a miracle. And so how do you get into this group? What's the cost of admission into the church? Are you ready? As a priest in the Church of England, someone who has done well over 6 years of theological study, who has a different title in front of their name, who's been given real and corporeal possession of the church. Do you want to know the answer? Here's how you get into the church. Come as you are. Come as you are. It's the only way that you can come. And it's easier said than done. You can come as you are because God invites you. You can come as you are because the church is God's. It doesn't belong to me. It doesn't belong to us. It is God's church. Jesus' body. He's the head of all of this. He's the one who gives out the invitations. He's the one who invites you to come. He's the one that has an invitation for all of you in this building and everyone in Wilford and everyone in our parish and everyone in our city and every human being on our planet. You can come as you are because God invites you. And it's easier said than done because despite this, despite that God invites all of us, despite the fact that God invites all of us, we find it hard to come as we are. We come into church, and I don't know if you maybe have this feeling like as soon as you cross the threshold into a church building, like you've got to put on a good front. Like you've got to pretend everything's okay, like you've got to smile, like you've got to clean up your act a little bit. Like you've got to know all the religious language, when to stand, when to sit. You've got to feel holy. Maybe like me in the gym, you walk in and you feel like you should already know how everything works. It's nonsense. It's nonsense. It's nothing to do with Jesus. It has nothing to do with the gospel. Maybe we've made people feel this. Maybe we've been ecclesiastical gym instructors. Maybe it's because we aren't we aren't aware that we are just as in need of everyone else as God's grace. And we see in our reading today, these are the words of Jesus from Luke 18, starting at verse 9, and he makes this point. Let me read it again. To some who were confident in their own righteousness and looked down on everyone else, Jesus told this parable. 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood by himself and prayed, God, I thank you that I'm not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give 1/10 of all I get. But the tax collector stood at a distance. He did not even look up to heaven, but beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and all those who humble themselves will be exalted. Let me give you a little bit of context on this passage, okay? Because just like the rest of Jesus' life and ministry, this is dynamite. This is revolutionary, and we can lose some of the impact of it. Jesus in this story compares two figures, right? A Pharisee and a tax collector. And a Pharisee was a Jewish religious leader. If that's a new word to you, these were the religious leaders, the religious experts of Jesus' day. They were the ones who were considered to be holy and spiritual. They were supposed to be the righteous ones. They told people what God was like. When you looked at a Pharisee, you should think holy, righteous, religious expert. Tax collectors, on the other hand, much like today, were not popular figures. If you think that tax collectors are unpopular now, you're not even close to how hated they were back in Jesus' day. Tax collectors were hated. When you heard the word tax collector, you just thought sinner. You thought terrible. They were looked down upon by just about everyone in society. They were outsiders. And they would be judged by others that would be seen. If you were seen with one, you'd be judged by others. And they were seen as traitors as well. And this is really important because they were Jews who worked for the Romans and were often known to extort and cheat the people from whom they were collecting taxes. If you wanted a modern equivalent, seriously, I'm not exaggerating. If you wanted a modern equivalent here, you might think of someone in the Ku Klux Klan, who, if you were even in their presence, people would start judging you for knowing them. So Jesus sets up this story with these two, a righteous religious leader and a sinner. And we're not idiots, right? What we'd expect to hear is that the righteous religious person is the one that's made right with God, and the sinner, the tax collector, is the one that is sent off condemned. But we see Jesus make the exact opposite point. We see him turn this expectation completely upside down because the sinner, the unrighteous one, the hated tax collector, hear the impact of this, goes home made right with God. The Greek word here for justified that's in the text means to be set free or to be made righteous. You could put it like this: the unrighteous one is made righteous. And why? How can this be possible? Many years ago, in one of my first courting relationships, I was maybe about 13 years old. I was going out with a girl from my little village. And we'd go to Pizza Hut and eat ice cream and do things that kids do when they have their first girlfriend, and it was all very fun. It got to the point where I knew I had to break up with her. It wasn't working. I knew I had to break up with her. And so I had a friend who was a couple of years older than me, and I thought, well, I'll consult my friend who's a couple of years older than me because she'll be able to tell me what to say. And she said, George, it's easy. You just need to knock on her door and say, it's not you, it's me. I don't deserve you. So I was like, brilliant advice. That's great advice. Okay, right, I'm just going to pluck up the courage. I'm going to do it today. So I knock on her door, knock. And she answers the door. And I'm sweating with nerves. And in the heat of the moment, I say, it's not me, it's you. You don't deserve me. I think we should break up. You can imagine people listening to this story thinking that Jesus had mixed his words up, right? What do you mean the sinner's made righteous and the righteous person isn't? What? You must have just had a moment. But Jesus hasn't made a mistake at all here. Because right here in this parable is the crux of the gospel. It's the crux of what Christianity is all about. That Jesus Christ loves sinners. Jesus Christ loves sinners. What was the one thing the tax collector did that the Pharisee didn't? He recognized that he was a sinner. He knew that he was broken. He knew he wasn't perfect. He knew that he needed a savior. He was honest with God. He knew the truth of his human condition. He didn't hide who he was, and God met him. And let me tell you today, friends, that is good news. Why is it good news? Because all of us are tax collectors. All of us are sinners. No one in this room is perfect. All of us are in need of rescue. All of us are a shambles. All of us are a mix of good and bad, of evil thoughts and righteous thoughts. All of us need God. All of us need the love of God in our lives. And here's the gospel, the message of Christianity, by the way, in case it's become at all fuzzy. That there is a God who made heaven and earth and who loves you, who calls you by name. And we were supposed to live in relationship with God. The most fulfilling thing that we can possibly do as human beings is to know God, is to be in relationship with him. But we thought, no, that can't be right. We'll just try and do life our own way. And what entered into the world is what Christians call sin. We tried to live life our own way. And where did it get us? We had violence and pain and suffering. We cheated people. We lusted. We walked away from all of the goodness that God had for us into chaos. And God, rather than just leaving us out here, rather than just saying, well, look, you screwed it up, I'll just leave you to your own devices. Rather than even just giving us nice words, God takes action. And he comes in the person of Jesus for you and for me. And he lives and he proclaims the message of the kingdom to all of us. And he loves us so much that he even dies that the sin, the separation that exists between me and God, between you and God, can be reconciled. And the amazing thing is you can have a relationship with God. What Jesus does is allows us to come back into relationship with God in the here and now. Like not at some point where we float off into the clouds with angels playing harps. Here and now we can know him. And you can hear his voice and you can have a relationship with him and you can know his presence in your life. You can know joy in the middle of suffering. You can know hope when there's only reason to despair. You can know purpose in your life. The longing that you feel within you, that all of us feel, that nothing quite fills, you can find fulfillment in Jesus. You come to God and he says, oh, I love you. I've been waiting for you. And he embraces us. See, the church is not a club for holy religious people. The church is a place for sinners who know their need for God. We're all welcome here because of Jesus. We're welcome here because of his death on the cross for our sins, because he has freed us. You know, when I make this point, I think of this old folk tale about the thief on the cross. The thief on the cross who was crucified next to Jesus, right? And I would just think, I would love to meet you one day. Because just before you died, you were like cussing Jesus out with your friend. And yet you made it. You managed to make it. How did you make it? You can imagine the angel standing at the gates of heaven, can't you, with the thief on the cross. You imagine the interview process. What are you doing here? Oh, I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? I don't know. What, have you been to Bible classes? Have you been baptized? Do you have a good doctrine of justification by faith? No, none of that. Have you been giving to your local church? No, none of that. And the angel gets more and more agitated and say, so what? On what basis are you here? And the thief on the cross says this: the man on the middle cross said I could come. The man on the middle cross said I could come. That's it. That's the entrance requirement for church. Jesus says you can come. And if our answer starts with anything else, if we don't preach this gospel to ourselves every day, we start to think, oh, we're here because we're a little bit better than everyone else. We're here because of our works. The church isn't a club for the holy. It's a hospital for the broken. When did we think that this was a place where we had to put on a brave face, pull ourselves together, learn the right language? When did we make church about Sunday best? I'm George, your vicar, your pastor. But I'm also George the sinner. I'm George who gets angry. He doesn't always feel like showing up on a Sunday. who's defensive, who isn't always kind to his wife. I'm George who, in my life, I've struggled with lust and pornography and all kinds of horrible things. I'm George, the sinner. But more than all of this, I'm George who's loved by God. George who's called by God. George who's welcomed by God in my sin and my mess. And I'm forgiven, set free, redeemed. And let me tell you this, the kingdom of God is messy. And if God answers the prayers that we're praying for this parish, this is going to look a whole lot messier. We're going to have to sit next to people and be with people that ordinarily in life you might have to cross the street from. It's going to look messy because all of us have messy lives. But on the other side of that, the good news is that if you're here today and you feel far from God, if you feel like this was never for you, you can know Jesus today. He welcomes you. If you feel like an outsider, if you long for more from life, Jesus is calling you. As a friend of mine once put it, the gospel, the good news of Jesus, the Christian message, should always comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable.